Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Hope everyone's doing well. The way I have been talking, I'm encouraging an attitude of observing which has no agenda in it, which is open, non-judgmental, non-critical, available, not fraught with desire to become or get rid of, so on and so forth. And as you know, the way I encourage that is by looking at very simple sense experiences. So again, as I'm talking, I look at the fan, and just looking at the fan, it's like this. And that simple observation of the way things are is, I think, what I'm encouraging. Now, that can seem very sterile, because nothing's happening. If something is happening, like you have maybe there's some deep grief coming up in the heart, or then it's still the same observation. It's still the same way of observing. But it usually has like grief has a lot of energy, tremendous amount of energy, and pain and so on, and has a life to it that is actually, in some sense, easier to observe. Although it's painful, it's more visible because it's got a lot of energy and so on. And then the capacity to observe it without getting rid of it or judging it or whatever is obviously very important, because otherwise the feelings of, in this case, grief, don't get processed. So there is that way. But probably more difficult is when you feel nothing. When there's no big deal. There's no big emotional thing. Your body sort of is behaving itself. And then it just seems very, very blank. And then, of course, the mind says, is this it? Shouldn't I be getting something? And desire comes up. So the first noble truth, there is suffering, is the word suffering can be rather deceptive, because it would seem like I need a lot of suffering to practice that. But any sense of discontent, any sense of discontent, like just the most minor doubt, or I'm not getting anywhere, or life seems so blah. These are all objects in awareness. And then the capacity to pay attention in that way, the language is openness, non-become, and you know how I use the words which are in opposition to the three types of craving: non-becoming, non-resistance, non-preoccupation. So for me, that language and those, not just the language, but the attitudes that they are promoting, the scene takes me back to consciousness itself, to awareness itself. When I'm interested in something, like I said, I'm weaving this pattern called krokbragd, I think that's how you pronounce it, which is a Scandinavian way of, very complex for me and maybe others. And so then I'm really focused on the object. I'm looking at the colors and trying to figure out, how does that work? So that we do quite well, most of us, I think. That's not so very, very difficult. But the other, this kind of pure observation, where your emphasis is on the observing rather than the object being observed, and then to see what happens there. The the kind of idea about it is it takes you, it illuminates the silence of the mind. Is that a right way to say it? It indicates the silence of the mind, the luminosity of the mind, or the clarity of mind, or the openness of mind, and the spaciousness of mind. And that's always there. That's always there, but our interest in objects is so compelling and necessary. Necessary. So whether you like to use the river or whatever, like sometimes you just have to give up meditating. You know, meditation can be such kind of hard work that it's good just to goof off, which I'm sure no one ever does here. And you sit on a bench and just be. So that you want to look at too. I think most of us are probably past that. That's usually beginner's meditation. You've really got to trabajo. You've really got to work at your meditation. But like relaxed attention is actually quite difficult. It's not easy. That from the reading, then the intellect at rest. Intellect at rest. And what's that? And then body at ease. And what's that? So these body meditations that I have suggested, that the feelings that like let the body be feeling. That's one way to put it. Let the body be feeling. And to get a sense that the body is in awareness rather than awareness being in the body. That is, I find, very, very helpful. So that takes me to Yoga Nidra and the way I practice it. And someone asked about it, so most of you heard me say this a million times, but so the way I learned Yoga Nidra was to use a bed or a soft surface, not a hard surface, so that I could hold a posture for long periods of time. And I wanted to be able to hold a meditative posture for at least 2 hours. So I wanted that because my legs were shot. And they're still shot. So, I mean, that was my kind of project. And although I tried like a yoga mat and hard surfaces and so on, I went, well, no, the body needs to be supported in a softer way. So I just used my bed. And then again, you put something under your knees. You take Sarvasana, corpse posture, either like that, or on your knees, or on your belly, or on your heart. And then make sure that you have something supporting under the knees. Because the small of the back is going to get a lot of stress if you're laid out flat for 2 hours. You don't have to do 2 hours. For 15 minutes. So that's important. And then the neck is very important. That the neck is not too far up or too far down. And the suggestion is to actually take time to set up the posture. So you make the whole mindset a formal posture as opposed to just flopping down on the bed. Just like when you sit on the zafu, you're setting your posture up, aren't you? And now, on the chair, learning how to do that, and so on. So the intention then is not just, and this isn't a meditation to help you sleep. You want to be careful of that, because if you're using meditation to fall asleep, you'll fall asleep during meditation. This is the way it works. So you're trying to actually have a lot of brightness in the mind and vitality. So, like if you're really, really dull in the afternoon, and you want to lay down and have a bit of a snooze, have a snooze, and then when you've done that, get up, wash your face, have a cup of tea, and go back. Go back to that posture, so you've got lots of energy. So then you have the posture set up in a kind of formal way, if you see what I mean. And then, again, you know how I say this, but make the intention, like set up your posture, and then this was the best instruction I heard from this teacher. He said, now adjust your posture 10% more to be comfortable. So make yourself comfortable, then deliberately do a 10% adjustment. Okay, I'm good now. And then don't move. Ta-da! And that's the practice. Don't move. That was the kind of beginning of it. So that was very helpful, because then I could see, oh, there's an itch there. I'll scratch it. Or I'll just... So the desire to move the body, or to scratch the body, or to fix the body, I knew it wasn't painful. I would counter that desire by not moving and knowing the desire, which calmed the mind. And then the body meditation that was included in that was the same way that I've been talking about the face, the head, and that, where the intention is to have an awareness of the body, have the awareness such that the body is a vibrating energy in awareness. Not my body or my back or my leg, but like this vibratory thing is what you experience it when you don't conceptualize it. You're not looking for any of that stuff, but I think that's what comes naturally. So then that posture allows you then to really very interesting to investigate how much effort do you need here. The body's held up. How much effort do you really need to make, and what is effort? And then obviously you're working with whatever the mind is throwing up. And one of the difficulties I found, that people end up on their side snoring. So they lost the plot. Somewhere along the line, they lost mindfulness. And that's what you want to do. If you're used to sleeping on your side, then you're looking for annihilation rather than liberation. And so that kind of temptation to roll over, like lots of people I see, they just find themselves rolled over. Oh, so your mindfulness isn't strong. Something you're not noticing what you're doing. Then the exploration of like effort, and the exploration of the mental formations is quite easy. No, not easy, but it's facilitated because you're not struggling with the pain in your body, especially for someone my age with my knees and so on. Because I struggled a long time trying to sit, and my knees were bad, and then that put my back out, that put my neck out, the schlemazel of that. And so I recommend this posture a lot to people. And they ask me, well, what about falling asleep? I don't tend, I tend to be able to do this quite well, but I often have a cup of coffee first. I'm not proud. Or a cup of tea, or I'm, it's in an awake time of my day. One thing about the posture is that most people there'll be a bit of snoring, but you can be aware of that, kind of snorting. But actually, the mind has dipped into something deeply relaxing, and that's the way it breathes. And if you're cultivating that open awareness, you'll notice that, and you'll stay with that more depth of relaxing. I found it also like that experience I told you about, where it was a Niagara Falls experience in a barrel. When I just did yoga nidra, I don't know what to do. I can't meditate with this beast. So I said, okay, give it to me. And it was difficult but doable, partially because I could just observe this thing. And because I had trained so much in an observation which didn't have an agenda. I've trained a lot in that, observation which is not based on becoming or getting rid of. So much of my, like the bread and butter of monasticism is that kind of observation. Then when this heavy thing came into consciousness, all the equipment was there to be able to process it, and the results are very good. it might seem very unproductive to kind of just look at a fan, and so what? And that's the desire mind seeking an experience, and our culture, of course, is outward oriented, and all cultures are supposed to have. So the amount of interesting things that we can go into now, like the amount of weaving diagrams on the internet, or the amount of interesting weavers who are out there, is exhausting. So the mind going out is the cause. The result of the mind going out is suffering. And it's not the suffering of pain, it's the suffering of missing out on the silence of the mind, maybe one way to put it. Sometimes it is suffering, like you just pick up anger and you run with it and you're done. So the mind, knowing the mind, just that awareness, where the awareness is emphasized rather than the object of awareness. This is why neutral objects are so helpful. And when we do meditation, we're not using exciting objects. Unless someone's, I don't know, most of the things we're observing are very boring. And what could be more boring than your knee? Your other knee. So it's actually an interesting thing, meditation, in the sense that we're not using excitement or fear to stimulate our capacity to observe in this particular way, but we're using anything. And so the strengthening of that kind of observation is possible. And if you do that more and more, you do find that the movement of the wheel, the noise on the circumference, the outside of the hurricane, is less and less. You're hooked into it less and less. Why? Because you've done the other. You stayed in the center of the storm, or you've chose the middle, the silence, and that becomes your home ground. So Luang Por, he'd use that, our real home, and use that a lot, especially that one book where he's talking about that when someone was dying, and saying to the person, the body's not your real home. The emotions are not your real home. Your real home is the knowing, the puru, the knowing of the mind. So don't be too worried about not getting anything. Because that's a kind of, and especially if you go to an interview and you hear someone is getting something, that is so intimidating. So I see that a lot in Thailand. Like 5 people, and one is like seeing every heavenly being that ever lived, and lights, and the whole, and then the others are sitting there. It's true. And then they come, I'm not getting any devas. But devas are still objects. It's a true story. What I think you want to notice, what is the lingering effect? You do this for, what's the lingering, what's the echo? And for me, the echo is this deep silence. Yeah, it's always there. And if you get a deva, great. But I've never had a deva, so, but I'm not looking for one either. You see what I mean? So maybe for yourself, like, obviously I've developed a language of attitudes rather than a language of absolute definitions. And that's the way I try to coach myself. I try to encourage myself. I try to put in that language, which then is like the mirror, isn't it? And that's what reflection is about, the idea of reflection. You put into the mind something like, this is changing, what is unchanging? And then you're silent. And then that's a mirror for observing what is conscious experience like. remember, I think 2-3 years ago, I suggested on a New Year's thing, I said, okay, everyone, your homework for the year is non-resistance. Oh yeah, boring. But do that for a year. Do that for a year, and it can have a profound result, because so much of our life is vibhava tanha, resistance. And so it's like the use of what is it, like strategic language? Or does that make sense? Like you're using language according to your citta, according to your conditioning, according to how you have been programmed. You're understanding where its fallacies are, where that's not going to work, and you start to put language in which helps you balance that. And of course, using the Four Noble Truths is classic. A lot of people, just like that mind going out is the problem. The mind knowing the mind is the end of the problem. Just that simple kind of going out. Again, you look across the river, and there's openness and space. And then, what is that mound? How many times have you done that, right? I've done that many times. Every time you go, what is that thing? It's not a moral problem, but you can really see how that works. You can see how the mind goes out, tries to pick out. Again, there's nothing wrong with it. And then when you notice that, you come back. You say, oh, it's like this. And then there's the waiting and the observing without agenda, with openness, without a goal in mind. That's very hard. It's very hard to do. But the lingering effect is peace, because you can see that peace is always there. Okay, shall we do a bit of sitting?